welcome to Solidarity Live with Alex and Jocelyn. We are very pleased that you're joining us here, even if it seems sort of like a giant dumpster fire of a reality at the moment. Point of this show is to get in there, examine the dumpster fire, look at the causes, remembering that it's always simple. Greedy liars on Wall Street, they're fascist foot soldiers, and the answer is always solidarity. So it is Friday, May 29th. Welcome to Solidarity. I'm Alex Lawson, and with me as always...
Hi guys, it's Jocelyn. Good to be with you. I wish it were under happier circumstances. Unfortunately, as always, we do not have we have an optimistic take on shitty things. Is that accurate, Alex?
That's pretty much spot on. You know, we're here now in the 70th day. I don't know. It's like year over 9,000 of the quarantine, social distancing. But now places are opening up haphazardly with no direction, even though there's been very little progress made, and we're basically just opening up right back to where we were before the lockdown. But it is, which is disheartening in its own right, because we had more than enough time to implement the simple public health initiatives, interventions. We learned last week just how amazingly effective universal masks are. More data coming out since then showing that Dr. Derry was right on. We see Japan now under 800 deaths total, and testing, trace, isolate. These are tried and true public health techniques that work, and yet none of them are happening here. That's one bleak part of the reality we're in. But then on top of that, reality doesn't stop. You know, the same bad things that were happening before, the same white supremacist structure that we were operating within before is still here. And we were just reminded of that in just such horrible terms. Jocelyn, I don't know if you want to set it up a little bit more about what happened in the murder of George Floyd. Was it 2 days ago?
It's hard. It's all happened really quickly. The murder, I think, was earlier this week, and thank God the people of Minneapolis aren't having it. People are losing their minds in the best way possible. They've taken to the streets. They're protesting. And as the words of Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King said, the riot is the language of the unheard. And for far, far, far too long in this country, Black Americans have been murdered in cold blood with no consequences for the people who do it and no consequences for the structures which allow that to happen. And this has been no different. The man in question, the police officer who did it, it's coming out that multiple police officers on the scene were part of the murder. It wasn't just this lone agent, but the gentleman, Derek, what's his last name? Derek something. Chauvin, that's right. He's killed at least 2 other people and was exonerated and allowed to return to the police officer position. That's disgusting. That is a disgusting reality. And as of now, he's been taken into custody, but we don't know how that's going to play out.
Well, I'd say we do know how it's going to play out, and that's the part that always gets me. This is all play acting that we're seeing right now. We're going to be joined by my business partner from We Act Radio, Kymone Freeman, who's also a leader in the Black liberation struggle and the struggle for justice, racial justice, and has been on the ground. One of the first big live streams that we were doing that we did was in Ferguson, and we were live streaming. I'm going to talk a little bit about this with Kymone, so I won't steal my own thunder. But I will say the reason it's so disheartening is because I do know what's going to happen. here's how killer cops murder Black and brown people with impunity. First, if there's no video, lie on the report, it's done. If there is a video, immediately demonize the murder victim. So they're going to use mug shots. They're going to use all sorts of muddying the waters. You know, the he's no angel, that sort of stuff. Doesn't matter if the murder victim is 11 or 60. It's the same. You can count on Fox Local and Fox National to do that. After that has happened, the police will dress up in all of the surplus military hardware that we, the U.S. taxpayers, buy for these local police offices all around the country to keep us safe, I think, is why they need tanks and full, military grade weapons. Then they go and there is a peaceful protest, and then the cops start shooting rubber bullets, less lethal rounds, macing people, tear gassing them, using acoustic weapons, the LARD system, a giant psyops military piece of hardware that we literally just give cops like they need this thing. It focuses sound on people. And when they studied it, it actually increases people's aggression. It actually triggers a fight or flight response in people. And then they're shooting tear gas at them. The whole point of this is to take a tinder box that's created from a police murder of an unarmed person who is always Black or brown, because this playbook does not work otherwise. Then the community response kicks off, and then there is a riot. There's going to be property damage, and then you can just the moment that happens, the story turns. It turns from the police on video. This cop was kneeling on a man's neck until he died, and the man was begging for his life, and the bystanders were saying, please stop killing this person in front of me. And there are 3 other police officers around, one of whom is stopping people from getting the other cop who's murdering him off of his neck. None of that is going to be talked about anymore. What's going to be talked about is why did they burn down Target? Why did these people burn down Target? Or whatever it is, the property damage. The riot, so-called, becomes the story. And that replaces the story that should be in the headlines, which is yet another Black or brown American murdered by the state. A tyrannical state that is murdering its own citizens with impunity. And on that super happy note, I'd like to welcome my business partner, Kymone Freeman, to Solidarity Live. Kymone, thanks for joining us.
Go peace, family.
So I would like to kick this off with, you heard my lead in, but I think that Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing should be taught in every single school about this phenomenon of the state murdering Black and brown folks in this country, and the what happens from it. And I think that movie is like 30 years old now, but it's still it's so perfectly relevant. It's literally this exact thing, because people watch it and there's 2 responses. It doesn't give you the answer of what is the right thing. It leaves you with a question, but there's a right question and a wrong question. But I think it's like perfectly down the line, and it predicts how you're going to react to a cop killing an unarmed Black man like George Floyd in Minnesota. Because the right question is, why did they kill Radio Raheem? but a significant amount of people come out of Watch and Do the Right Thing and they ask, why did they burn down Sal's? That to me is that's it, right? Like that's hey, why are they burning down Target? So I want to just kind of give you those two questions and see where you go with it.
Well, I'm all for, expanding the educational experience in America is greatly in need of that. I will add Howard Zenner to that mix as well. But a lot of people, well, also let me go further and say that in terms of the riot being the story, there are numerous cases of white people rioting in jubilation, rioting in celebration, rioting because their team won. You saw what happened in Philadelphia when they won the Super Bowl. So those riots seem to be okay. And as your co-host said earlier, referring to Martin Luther King's riots as the voices of the unheard. But I also want to make sure that part of this revolution in education points out to the fact that the FBI 2006 FBI report says that law enforcement has been infiltrated by white supremacists, and they're called ghost dogs. They don't give Nazi salutes. They don't wear swastikas, but they go about their business of pursuing their agenda. And this is from the FBI. So who are no friends to black people. I mean, the FBI called Martin Luther King the most dangerous black man in America. The FBI withheld information against Geronimo Pratt, former Black Panther Party member who did 27 years in prison. And the FBI knew he was innocent because they was doing wiretaps that proved he was in another place when this alleged crime took place. This is the FBI who now admits that white supremacists have taken over law enforcement, but nothing has ever been done about it. And we have to do the heavy lifting of redesigning what policing in America means, because until the police department and the officers in question are personally held responsible, because a lot of these cases we don't know about, but the police departments all across America pays out millions of dollars every single year in cases of police misconduct or police brutality. But that money does not come out of the police department budget. The money doesn't come out of the officer in question's pocket and salary. It comes out of the city's budget. It means the taxpayers are actually paying for their own oppression and brutalization. So until the money comes out of those people's pockets, we won't see any change in road police behavior. Until we have community control of police, where we have citizen review boards with the power to hire and fire. We have a lot of these citizen complaint organizations throughout the country, but none of them have the power to fire police officers. And so we have to totally redesign what it is to have control over the police and police accountability.
Well, and Kymone, I mean, it's so funny because everything you're saying, you're educating me about things, but it's a lot of people don't acknowledge how deeply this goes. And what do you speak so much about doing something and people getting involved. Where do people begin to get involved with these kinds of fights? Well,
change comes from the bottom up and it starts on the ground. And I think that we should all be in the faces of our representatives. I just posted a video of me 5 years ago testifying against before the Obama's 21st Century Police Task Force hearing about my top 5 ways to reform the police. And that fell on deaf ears. But if people could go back and check out the top 5, and everyone starts to contact their representatives to force them to have this type of accountability, I think we'll begin to see change. I think we have been throwing our hands up. There's nothing we can do, and we da-da-da. But the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. And now I think we have come to the point where so many people are saying the same thing, seeing the same thing. And whenever a CNN reporter gets arrested on air, and the white guy tells you that he was treated much better, but they arrested the black guy. And Alex would remember this when we was in Ferguson, because one of our guys got shot with a beanbag. Now the white guy that was with him was allowed to go use his media credentials to stay on the scene, and the black guy gets shot who was actually not actually on the police scene. So we've seen this over and over. But in terms of what we can do, we all have to do something, and that starts locally with our representatives. It starts locally with us raising the bar of accountability, and we also got to start. All have to start in supporting independent media outlets who are talking about the real stories, who is actually doing the work and doing the heavy lifting to get these things out here and get them addressed. So I think we won't have the revolution we want until we have a media revolution, but we need to start at the ground floor.
And one of those would obviously be We Act Radio, located in beautiful Anacostia and run by Kymone. And we've spent, a decade now trying to tell the story, trying to dig into these stories and expose them and not get distracted. The story is about George Floyd being murdered by agents of the state. I want to just do a little thing here. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Best way to stop this pandemic could be over in a month is if you just wear a mask, just like a bandana over your face. That's all you got to do. If everyone just did that in about 30 days, it'd be over. The government, some state governments were like, hey, y'all, we're not going to mandate you wearing masks, but you all should wear masks. White men went bananas. They showed up at state governments in full military gear with machine guns, talking about state tyranny for being asked to wear a mask. And they show up with machine guns, and the police did nothing. There's a video of a guy with a machine gun turning quickly and hitting one of the police officers in the face with his machine gun, and they both laugh. When we were live streaming in Ferguson, as Kymone just said, we had big helmets that said journalist, bright reflective vests, one black producer, one white producer. They both stood up, said journalist, journalist, journalist. Black producer was shot from a shotgun, right? This is a real shotgun. It has a beanbag in it. It's called a less lethal round. It hit him right here. I'm on the phone with him. It hit him here. He's dead, and his son is an orphan. It hit him here. It was an instantaneous reaction by this police officer that summed up the whole thing. Two people, one white, one black, immediately shoot the black producer. And as Kymone also said, that just happened basically on CNN live. I want to dig in a little bit more, Kymone, because I know you can work exposing this part of the system, and Jocelyn as well. And this is what we do on Solidarity Live. So the question is, why are there these racist cops? Why? What is the right? The FBI said it. Rage Against the Machine sang about it. When was Rodney King? 30 years ago as well, somewhere.
Yeah.
Right in there. Right?
Me too.
So some of them that work forces, same that burn crosses, right? This is a very known thing. But I think the one that's not as well known, because there is white supremacy, and it's about racists. But there's also an economic piece here. There's a power structure that white supremacy is built on to protect. And that power structure is the same one that we talk about all the time with these greedy liars on Wall Street, and they extract wealth from people. That's all they do. They're parasites that extract wealth from people and from communities. And a lot of this the reason that killer racist cops are sort of given impunity is because they're not there to protect and serve the people. They're there to protect and serve the system, the status quo that is making some people rich by keeping other people, quote unquote, in their place. And that cycle of poverty, endemic poverty, why in Washington, D.C., which is a very geographically small place, is there such disparity in health, wealth, and opportunity? And that's what I want, Kymone, if you can sort of speak to how the police are not a force to protect and serve all people. And that's what this is about, transforming the police system into one that where this doesn't happen. They would have to actually protect and serve all the people, not the status quo that is only for the rich.
Well, I definitely want to appreciate you bringing up the fact that armed protesters are treated much better than unarmed protesters. Somehow the police are very polite when you have the complexion for the connection and you have more weapons than they do, as opposed to being unarmed and black. Ida B. Wells, which was one of the preeminent activists in the 20th century, who dedicated her life to documenting and advocating against lynching in America, says that those who commit the murders write the reports. Those words sit on the front door of We Act Radio. And I cannot tell you how many times people have stopped and took pictures of that. And so we're talking about the roots of policing, which comes from slave catchers in America. Police have always been here to control those people at the behest of those in power. You go back in the civil rights movement and look at all those iconic images. It's the police that's attacking these protesters. You know, when we talk about the Selma, there was police that was doing the brutality. We talk about Congressman John Connors. That was police that beat his head in. You know, so this is the history of policing in America, and for far too long it has been accepted. It's been accepted because this is a racist country built upon slavery and genocide that sees nothing wrong with brutalizing those people and keeping them in their place. That has been the specific and explicit role of policing in America. Now, you would think that it would change because we have liberals. You think it would have changed because we have black people on the force, but the operandi has not changed. In Minneapolis, I believe the police chief is black. In Minneapolis, I believe that the area is liberal. This is not Trump territory. And we see what's happening there. That does not change what is fundamentally the orders and the status quo and the mentality within the police force. Let me tell you a quick story. A friend of mine was a police officer, and he was forced to shoot someone. And he did not kill them. He chose to shoot them in the leg. So the guy lived. His grandmother, there's two different responses. His grandmother thanks him for not killing her grandchild. But when he gets to the police station, they are pouring champagne over his head like he just won an NBA championship and saying he just broke a cherry. And better luck next time, you know, because, you know, he needs to go to the range and work on his shot because he does, he didn't get it, but that he went to counseling for this. But that's to give you some insight into the culture and the mindset of the police. And this is a black police officer. And those were also black police officers that was pouring champagne on him. So I want you to understand that just because there's a black person does not mean that is going to be a better treatment and a better outcome. And this is the culture that we have to address. And this is why we have the situation we have now, because it's finally come to a head, and hopefully we'll get some changes that we wanted to see. Because if Barack Obama had worked harder, as hard as he tried to get Trans-Pacific Partnership passed or prevent Bernie Sanders from getting elected, but had worked on changing the culture in the police department, then maybe we wouldn't have some of these problems. Because if we have a black president and he can't even protect us from the police, then that means there's something that else has to be done.
Well, and I love that you bring that up, because I think a lot of white racists like to use black police officers as proof that there isn't racism within the force. I mean, you hear this, you see like crazy Trump types be like, oh, well, if the cops are racist, explain why there are black cops. How do you help people understand? Because first of all, you're not going to argue with those people, but how do you help people understand who maybe just aren't educated the extent to which it doesn't really matter. This is a racist institution, regardless of the color of the person holding the gun.
Well, it's a quote that says, never argue with the fool, because from a distance you can't tell the difference. So I don't actually allocate a lot of my time going back and forth once I realize who I'm talking to. But what we do need to do is take that energy and turn it against the system. And I think it needs to be in the form of economic protests. It should be general strikes. It should be a question of tax resistance. It should be a question of anything that's on the table that will get the attention of those in power on a local level to begin to start to change some of the mechanisms that have been used to oppress people, and not just people of color, poor people in general, are on the short end of the stick when it comes to police. People are held, because they can't afford bail. People are held without charges, but these things need to be addressed and reformed. But in terms of where do we start, that's the heavy lifting. That's the heavy lifting, because clearly our representatives are not doing enough for the people that's been directly affected and oppressed by the current police state in America.
So, Kymone, one time you were speaking at an anti-surveillance state rally. You remember that? Yeah. And it was you had a line in there that really grabbed people. Do you remember what it was?
I think it said that something to the effect that we all black now.
Yeah, that's the one.
and that
it was a pretty white crowd, right? Because it was like progressive, DC, and you're up there, and you said we're all black now, and everyone was like, what? And they all start listening, and then I want to expand on it, but what did you mean by that?
What I mean by that, and I wrote an article, I think it was in Truth Out, published it, that the history of surveillance started with black people. Black people have been under surveillance in this country since day one. It was illegal for black people to congregate in this country without a white person being present. Anytime there's more than two black people in the same corner, the police have the right to break us up. But again, Martin Luther King, who committed no crime other on the local level, no federal crimes, was under the most intense federal surveillance that any other person in the history of America. Martin Luther King. The Prince of
not
Peace.
Just surveillance, though. Let's go ahead and Kymone and
okay, well, he was assassinated by the FBI.
And first, they're trying to they literally tried to blackmail him into killing himself.
And there's that.
And Bobby Kennedy signed off on J. Edgar Hoover's wiretaps. The entire point of these wiretaps were literally to try to get him to a place where they could eliminate him by any means necessary. And this is the entire force of the U.S. government. MLK's wife won a lawsuit against the federal government as co-conspirators in the assassination of MLK. Is that what you were referencing just a second ago?
Yeah, that's a very, very little known fact there.
It is. And so when you say that, people are like, that sounds crazy. He's saying the FBI, and you're like, no, go read the documents. It was a conspiracy. Some of it is a conspiracy of not doing anything, right? Because this is one of the most surveilled people ever. And somehow he gets assassinated. And there's no, like, the FBI are all over the white racist KKK and all of that's going on, where they're planning the assassination of MLK, and they did nothing, which is where the lawsuit comes from. And she won. You want to say a little bit more, and then I want to go back to that the expansion of the police state.
I want to point out the fact that in our coverage in Ferguson, we reported that people had said that police were starting fires, and that we saw flash grenades by police drone end up starting fires. And so no one really picked that story up. And again, back to independent media and the importance of us being here. But Tom Hartman today was addressing the fact that there was a gentleman all in black with an umbrella, a white gentleman, who was just casually walking down the street, breaking windows. And they got him on video doing it. And you can clearly tell that he is not a protester.
This is in Minneapolis.
And in Minneapolis.
And in the video, you can actually see like 4 people run up to him and are like, "Hey, what are you doing, man?" The first is a young guy.
He clearly is the agent of provocateur, and I would submit to you that he's the agent of the state. And that was the purpose of the umbrella, to minimize his face video film. So we always have the state involved. Tom Hartman went on to say that, if you got 5 guys conspiring in the basement, 4 of them was a police officer and the 5th one was an idiot. So we have to acknowledge that the state is involved. We have to acknowledge this, and I hope to see the mainstream media dig deep into the story that we just alluded to, and hopefully that will begin the Pandora box of opening what it is that we call policing in America.
So, Kymone, I want to because we're going to close out our interview with you, which has been fantastic, and thank you for joining. But I want you to stay on a little bit more to talk about this, because I want you to tell me if you think this is wrong. It's definitely white supremacy, no doubt. It's a playbook of murdering black and brown people that the cops can get away with. I told you about. But you then said something that I've been noticing more and more. It's not just black and brown people. Now you're seeing a lot of the system really, it's about poor people. And MLK was assassinated when he was talking about ending poverty, and he was fighting for wages and economic security. That's when the system starts getting really scared. But what I'm seeing is that we're at such I don't know where it is on the snake, but we're at a point where the state is lashing out at more and more and more people. Not the dudes with the machine guns that go to the state capitol, but that the oppressiveness of the state is actually becoming just like scattershot in a way. There's still an enormous amount of institutional racism. Never going to say that's not happening, but that these structures are sort of metastasizing. Because part of it is like killing with impunity, give them machine guns and tanks and stuff. And it's just like, what is going to happen? They're going to start holding more and more and more authority to control and maintain the status quo. Do you feel that I'm way off on that, or are you seeing something similar?
No, definitely. We all black now, and we all going to be treated like that. And but I think it's a good thing, because it proves to me that the system is desperate to maintain itself, to protect itself. It's wounded animal. Unfortunately, a wounded animal is at its most dangerous state. And that's where we are in the American empire. The state is in danger. It feels threatened. It is desperate. Trump is president. You don't get more desperate than that, to maintain the status quo. And we saw in Occupy Wall Street, which was largely a white movement, how they was brutalized by the police. They didn't care. And it's funny that you should bring up Martin Luther King, because, as you said, his Poor People's Campaign was his last efforts. And he had proposed to occupy the mall until it got addressed, and then have Occupy Wall Street live up to that creed and then be brutalized under the Obama administration. And in fact, the Occupy Wall Street was like our first assignment. When we Acquitted was born, the first thing that we did was go to Zuccotti Park. But yes, we are living in I think the last days of the American empire that is about to contract. And we're about to enter into a very hard economic downturn. And we're going to have to be very vigilant to make sure that it turns a progressive turn rather than a fascist turn.
And that, Kymone Freeman, is exactly why you and I work together, why Jocelyn and I have this show, Solidarity Live, is because we believe fundamentally the same, that right now we're at a crossroads and there are two paths. And one of them is barbarity, and the other one is where we put the people first. Democratic socialism, doesn't matter what name you give it. What it means is a system where we all work together, a system where the police are there to protect and serve all of us, not the billionaires. And the only thing that we have to lose when we take our left turn here is a handful of billionaires. They won't be able to be hanging out in this new system. They're not going to be able, Jeff Bezos will not be a trillionaire, but unarmed Black men are going to be a lot safer on the streets of America. But it's not guaranteed that we take that path. I think Reverend Barber called the same wounded animals, I think he called it the dying mule kick. And that is, it can be lethal as well. So we have to be vigilant, and we have to understand the stakes for us, for our children, for our grandchildren, for the future. But the unyielding optimism, Kymone, that you always bring to this struggle is also incredibly refreshing as well. That we will win when we stand together in solidarity. That is how we can beat anything they throw at us. So Kymone Freeman, thank you so much for joining us on Solidarity Live with Jocelyn and Alex.
Thank you. And I just want to tell your listeners that they can go to React Radio's YouTube channel to see my testimony against the 21st Century Police Task Force and the top 5 things that we can actually do right now to reform policing in America.
Thanks, Kymone. So Jocelyn, what do you think?
Oh God. I mean, it is hopeful, and it's inspiring to hear from Kymone and from all the incredible people who are doing incredible work and have been doing the incredible work. This isn't a new fight, and I love when you two bring up the historic roots of this, because it's not new. None of this is new. This is a struggle that's been going on for hundreds of years, ever since white colonizers went to Africa and started subjecting people to this sort of institutionalized brutality. And one thing I was thinking about, Alex, this morning when I was getting ready, it's like, resisted the urge to type a thesis on Facebook about it. Like, even the language isn't new. It's really interesting to me. There's a narrative that we're fed in history class, especially in white schools, but really everywhere, that there were these dark ages where there was slavery and everyone was bad and evil. And then there was some stuff happened, the Gettysburg Address, and then Martin Luther King, who everybody was such a big fan of at the time. And now the golden days, when none of that is true. And in all of these, have you ever, I know that we like our book nerd moments. Have you ever read Gone with the Wind?
I have not. I have not read Gone with the Wind.
Okay. I actually think if you want a really great primer on how white people get propagandized, reading Gone with the Wind. I mean, it's super fucking long, so I'm not actually going to tell people to read it. But I read it in middle school.
I mean, I watched the movie.
Well, and you get the general idea, right? Yeah. Like, the language is and this is what's so funny to me, because we have a culture which loves Gone with the Wind and has turned it into this romantic story. But the novel spends 100 pages talking about how the KKK is really just a bunch of nostalgic white men who want to protect their families. It's actually a wonderful example of how Caucasian violence and white supremacy is really baked in to our sense of who we are as a country. This is a book about people who did not see slavery as a bad thing, but really, if Black people could live alone, wouldn't they be living alone? They need the helpful white people to give them food and housing. This benevolent rhetoric around racism has been going on since slavery itself. And I think it's really important that we talk about that.
I agree. I also think there is, I'm going to read this quote first, just so people have it. And then this is from the King Center, MLK, thekingcenter.org. Assassination conspiracy trial. After 4 weeks of testimony and over 70 witnesses in a civil trial in Memphis, Tennessee, 12 jurors reached a unanimous verdict on December 8th, 1999. After about an hour of deliberation, that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. Mrs. Coretta Scott King said, "There's abundant evidence of a major high-level conspiracy in the assassination of my husband, Martin Luther King Jr." And I really do recommend that people go and look at that. And I'm gonna come to Gone with the Wind. I love the lead-in. It's super important because there's this thing that you said that is amazing, right? Like people's understanding of MLK, the amount of times now, right after an unarmed black man is murdered by the cops in a video that's so grotesque that it boggles the mind, and to believe that that this wasn't happening before videos. It's just it wasn't on video, right? But like we've been talking, like the Rage Against the Machine album came out because Rodney King was one of the first ones on video, and then the cops are exonerated. What happens at the end of Ferguson? The cops exonerated. We know what this system is. We know why it exists, and it does go all the way back to slavery. I'll get this book out and we'll do book corner because I haven't read Gone with the Wind, and I don't think I will because I watched the movie and it's horrible. But there's this book on the history of the abolitionist movement that is a textbook. I'm going to look when you're talking and I'll get the name of it. And the slaves, I'll get the name of it. And it really delves into how, slave trade, white supremacy, the system, chattel slavery, the slave catchers. It's obviously race. And it's the same time, it's economic, right? It was not the cotton that the slaves were picking that was the primary value for the white slave owners in the South. I didn't know that till very late in my life. I always thought, obviously, the way slavery worked was that, they didn't pay wages, and so therefore the cotton was worth more. That's kind of what it is, but that's not what it is. The slaves themselves were the value that these families had and passed down. And it was the slaves themselves that created the aristocracy in the so-called antebellum South. They even give it a stupid, flowery sounding name, even though it just means before the war, obviously. Before the war. Why don't you call it the slave owning South? Before we had to actually have a war to stop people from owning other people. And the moment that chattel slavery was over, right? The moment it was over, the economic system that was built on it collapsed because the value was not in the cotton. Then what happens is Abraham Lincoln is assassinated. And the system actually comes at least half or a quarter of the way back because the same slave-owning aristocrats, the same greedy liars on Wall Street, but at the time it was these Southern aristocrats. There's always a small band of people who are extracting wealth from people. Now, they couldn't have chattel slavery anymore because I think 600,000 Americans died to end that scourge. But what they did is they came up with other forms of extracting wealth from people, primarily people of color. And that's when you get into the terrorism of the KKK, and the anti-Reconstruction that happened. So the pendulum does not actually, the Civil War ends chattel slavery, but the system that was built on survives and comes down, at least in part, all the way to today. There are still pieces of it visible. You look at maps of COVID response here, or where are the governors, throwing people as cannon fodder back into with no public health interventions. And, it's not all the old Confederacy, but it's a whole lot of the old Confederacy is where that's happening. So it's really obvious that we have never dealt with the actual roots of racism in this country in a way that has meaningfully changed. It can come back at any moment. So it can get better, and it's obviously better. It obviously has gotten better since they had actual slave chasers, and they could actually put men and women and children in chains, and they could take humans, children, away from them and sell them on. But we're still taking children away from families now, and we're still holding children in cages now, brown children from their brown parents. And that too is to protect a system and a structure. So we are, and I'm very hopeful, like Kymone, that we are at a point where we can choose to move in a direction that it can never be irreversible, but can be difficult to reverse. And the way at this, the class race thing, right? And then lefties are like, class first, race first, class, right? And then it just becomes stupid. All at the same time, because it's one thing, it's one fight, and only with solidarity can we address this. So if you are not out front right now in the fight against racist killer cops, you are not fighting for economic justice. You are not fighting.
I love that you bring that up, because this is something that all leftists, any serious leftist, honestly, just like any basically decent human needs to understand. This is not, we live in a time where people like to be like, this is my issue. I'm a climate person, or I'm a racial justice person. No, it's all the same thing. It's all the same rotten to the core, broken system. And you have to fight it uniformly. Sure, there's it's like you said, it gets stupid on the left sometimes. People no war but the class war versus everything is it's all together. These are not in competition. Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything, is all about how the climate fight is just emblematic of every other part of our broken system. The economy that is premised on bringing the world to its knees is the same economy that went to Africa and put people in chains and brought them over here to do our manual labor. It's all the same broken, brutal system. And there is no reason that we can't be in this fight together, because fighting amongst ourselves just doesn't work. Well, it's boring, but it also doesn't work.
Not only it is the tool of the oppressors. It is literally, you can read back to Herodotus, the first historian, who I'm sure, Jocelyn, we can talk about Herodotus or Thucydides.
The history.
But it is the oldest trick of the tyrant to take the people who he is oppressing and to pit them against each other.
Yeah.
So one thing that I'm seeing right now that we work on a lot at Social Security Works is the fact that there is this big generational divide, that young people are like, the baby boomers ruined everything. And it's, all the boomers' fault and all the old people's fault. And in fact, it's still the rich people. It's still the billionaires. And instead of the old and the young standing in solidarity, they're at each other's throats. So much so that, as COVID is ripping across this country, we crossed 100,000 deaths. 35,000 of them are in nursing homes. But if you listen to the media or people talking, they say that, well, it's just people in nursing homes. People in nursing homes. These are human beings with lives and stories and wants and dreams and aspirations. When you get older, you still count. And in pitting the young against the old, Donald Trump right now is getting away with a policy that's murdering tens of thousands of seniors. Just they worked the moment the crisis hit these nursing homes, the federal government snapped into action, state government snapped into action, and they started working furiously, and they passed things to protect the private equity firms that own the nursing homes from liability for the fact that tens of thousands of seniors are dying in their facilities due to criminal negligence. That's the response. That's the same system. And I think seniors, you're seeing it in the polling, are starting to wake up now as well about who's doing what. And you're seeing that Donald Trump is losing support among seniors because his plan is to kill seniors. And what it says to me, and I hope I can weave it all together in this one, is literally that the cliche, all of the cliches that basically say if one person is oppressed, we all are. Because if it's okay for these people to die because, oh, well, they're only seniors in nursing homes, or only people in nursing homes are dying, or if the armed agents of the state are able to murder people with impunity, and it's like, yeah, but it's only Black people who then burn down their own neighborhoods. If you use that word only to excuse any loss of life that the system takes, any life that the system takes, you will become that only at some point. At some point, the system's going to come for you. Unless you are a billionaire right now, you're not invited to their party. You are their cannon fodder.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I think one thing that I really introspect a lot on, or maybe outrospect is the right word, is the way that Americans are disenfranchised by their own arrogance every single day. We all want to believe that we are one. It's really interesting because my ex and I used to get into this debate a lot. Like, class anxiety is the best tool the elites have to keep us under their thumb, right? Because I will be the first, like, I really am somebody who thinks a lot about the fact that even if you're doing well, even if you have a middle class or even an upper middle class job, you are one cancer diagnosis away from complete economic insecurity. And we have lived under that system for so long that we're just used to it. How insane is that? Like, the worst part of getting sick with a serious chronic fatal disease should not be the financial implications. And it's again, it's all tied together. The best thing that these people can get from us is for us to be complicit in our own destruction, because then they have to do less work. And for us to be like, oh, well, like,
let me just agree with you, but with one disagreement. They can't destroy us. This is this thing that when I say all power resides in the people, the billionaires, there's literally a handful of them. They can't do anything to us.
That's true.
The only thing they can do is to turn us against each other, and then we rip ourselves to shreds.
That actually, you know what? Thank you for interrupting me, because that is a much better point. And you're right. I mean, ultimately, the thing that it's crazy to me. Like, if we all got together and didn't allow ourselves to be torn apart by petty infighting, the things we could do are they're just unlimited. But the first war we have to fight is with ourselves. and to psychologically be like, yeah, I do deserve to have basic access to health care when the technology is available, the professionals are available, and there's literally no reason why it's the cost of an expensive home to get basic care for a common illness. That should not be the case. I should be able to entrust that the police officers are not going to murder me or my family for an alleged nonviolent offense. These are things that we should be able to just assume going about our daily lives. And wanting a society which exists like that is not radical. But we have to, I don't know. How do we get people to believe that?
It'd be good, Jocelyn, if there was a word.
What was a word?
One word that really captured that. All of us in together.
All of us together. Solidarity has just this like melodic ring to it.
A really good ring to it. So the answer, yet again, to what we're talking about is solidarity. And it is really important. I just want to note that somebody on Social Security Works' Facebook page. So we're on act.tv and Social Security Works and We Act Radio. But they said that I definitely do need to read the book because Gone with the Wind is very different. The book is very different than the movie. And so I'm going to put it at the bottom of my reading list, which is really long. And I have 2 small children. But I will get to it. The thing that I want, it's hard because Social Security Works. What we do is we fight a lot, primarily for issues that you might define as senior issues: Social Security, nursing homes, prescription drugs. So why do we want? And I'm the executive director. Why am I fighting for racial justice? Because it's the same thing. You cannot have justice for seniors as long as we live in a society where it is allowable for somebody to count less, so much less that their death is unaccountable for. Then it's the same system that will allow 35,000 people to die because they're less, because they're old, because they're in nursing homes. And it's only in this radical solidarity where we're going to get beyond just class, race. We need all of us together. It's a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-generational cohort of people, all of us together standing in solidarity. And the only folks who aren't invited to our house party when this pandemic is over, and the party's going to be called Solidarity, are the billionaires. They can give their money and not be billionaires anymore, pay their fair share, enter back into society, and then they can come to the party. But the only people who can't really come to the party that we're talking about are this handful of greedy liars with a sickness that they need to extract wealth from people. They're not invited. So Jocelyn, why don't you close us out in any way you see fit here?
Thank you so much for being with us, you guys. And Alex, as always, it's a pleasure. Kymone, I do recommend people look up We Act Radio and all the incredible work it does. And Kymone, was it his YouTube channel or We Act's YouTube channel?
We Act Radio's YouTube channel. And you can go to weactradio.com and I'll put it on the front page there as well. Or We Act Radio on YouTube or We Act Radio on Facebook. You can find us on all the channels or Twitter.
Yeah. But regardless, thank you so much, everyone, for being with us. And please just like we've been saying, stay optimistic, because the reality is there are so many more of us than there are of them. And with solidarity, I do believe that we will eventually be victorious and then have new battles to fight. Thank you so much, everyone.